they fly?
I don't know. That's why I'm going to build one.
That's why I'm going to build one.
Are we good?
You're on.
All right. Welcome. Another edition of Tuesdays Night at 9ish. It's Cousin Cast coming to you, a trio of cousins. It's season 3, episode 22, Explorers. It's all about, Cisco and Jake go build a sail ship and fly from the station to Cardassia to myth bust Ducat and the rest of the Cardassians about the Bajoran legend that they invented space travel before the Cardassians. But it's also about how Bashir is now not entirely annoying and everybody else kind of sort of like similar, but they like screwing with them as well. Dr. Lynch
It's the only explanation.
That is the only explanation. Thank you, Chief O'Brien. But without further ado, let's bring in the co-host of this podcast, this nonsense. We have my brother, Dave Mader. Let's bring him in. Dave, how are you?
Hey, Jeff. Good. I'm here to explore explorers, as they say.
Oh, well,
this was a good episode. I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would.
Oh, it's a great episode, I think. But let's bring in our cousin, Dave, Davan Skelhorn, all the way from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. How are you, Davan?
Doing well. Ready to tack into the wind and discuss pre-ganglionic fibers and post-ganglionic nerves.
and was that an on-purpose decision by Bashir to purposely screw that up? I say yes.
Yes, anyone who knows about those things, apparently, so I hear, would know the difference. It's like not even close. It's like a first-year medical student would know the difference.
Yeah, he threw the game for sure.
He threw the game.
He threw the game to come second place to not give away his cover. Brilliant. Nobody notices the person who comes second. Everybody feels bad for the person that comes second, too.
Silver medal.
And that's what this episode's all about, is Bashir drinking his sorrows away of not basically having to make that decision, even though the audience does not know that yet. We don't not yet know that Bashir is, what's the word, Dave? Artificially enhanced?
Genetically enhanced.
Genetically enhanced, not from nature.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't know that yet, but I do think there's lots of great clues in here, but we'll get to all that. Dave.
Yes.
What in this episode kind of stands out to you? Like we get some introductions here. We get
I think let's not bury the lead too much. Well, yeah, okay, we got the Cisco goatee. I don't know if that comes before or after the introduction of Chase Masterson as Lita. I think that's the opening scene, right? Or is it
the opening scene? Yep.
Yeah, so there's the opening scene. We get Lita, the doctor hitting on Lita, as played by Chase Masterson. We will get quite a bit more of her character, but this is kind of significant that she shows up here.
Cough for me.
Yeah, he's got to make sure she's all right.
Oh dear.
Yes, and
we need to start your treatment immediately.
The moment he gives the pad to Jadzia and it just says "go away" on it, I think is one of my favorite moments in Star Trek, as far as them using the pads as a prop, because they never ever use them that way. They never use it for a joke. It's always like, intelligence on there. Davan, is this opening scene, does this stand out? Introduction to Lita, thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good intro for her character, I think. It's a funny little intro where she's approaching him instead of the other way around, which you might expect.
Right.
Well, he's a rich doctor. Come on. He's making the dough. He's making all the transporter rations. A month's
so many
worth.
Starfleet credits.
So many transporter credits or whatever that Cisco used from going from New Orleans to San Francisco.
And like Lita is like a taller, like version of Kira, but less hardened. She's super like sweet and like to me, like she's Bajoran. She just has a lot of like similarities, I think, to the non-visitor, but she comes in with like, the cleavage is going, and she's just immediately stands out as like this, like, whoa, like, what's going on here? I think in this, especially in this time period in 1990, what is it, 1995, 96?
95, this one. Yeah, I think her character, was an interesting addition. I think that her introducing her as a love interest for Bashir, I think, is kind of fun, because it kind of like this whole him chasing Dax thing. I'm over it, even by this point. If Actually, I was over long before, but I think it gives like, because she's going to end up going off with Worf in the next season too. So it's and then eventually she's going to end up with Rom, right? So it's I like her character. I like her addition. She's right there till the end, and she pops up in Star Trek Online, and
She does.
even as the Mirror Lita.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, and kind of Dave tells Davan, you're kind of, remember we were talking to Rob's sister Nino,
Yeah.
and he told us a story about Lita.
Yeah. So Rob's sister Nino of Survivor Amazon competitiveness. Also, the Rob has a podcast Empire, and the post show recaps. And so he was like, when I was first getting into the radio business or right out of school, I had to do something with Chase Masterson, like some kind of a show, and she was not organized, I'll tell you. Yeah, and then I was like, but she was at Star Trek Online, and he didn't know what I meant. Anyway, so
that's
Right.
cool.
It was kind of cool. Okay, well, let's get into the second part here, where we talk about Sisko wants to build a light ship.
Yeah, so Sisko coming in here in the beginning, we got the goatee. It's got to be mentioned. It's the beginning. This is the thickest. This is the thickest I think we see his beard ever.
Yeah, it almost looks fake. I wonder in fun facts if we're gonna find out if that's fake. But because I
want to just get a close up of it there, more front on.
It doesn't look like his goatee later.
No, it's he never wears it that thick again.
I think they were still afraid to go full Hawk.
They were because there was some, but Avery Brooks, I think you can tell that this is the first episode in a while where we've had Avery Brooks really sink his teeth into an episode. And it's funny because it's just him and Jake, pretty much the entire Jake and Ducat is pretty much those only.
It's half the episode, and the other half's this Bashir storyline.
Yeah, but which is usual. We've had a lot of stories where Sisko's not really involved with the rest of the crew,
and Jake's hardly ever there.
Yeah, Jake hasn't been in an episode in I feel like 10 episodes, something like that. So this,
but he's gonna go to New Zealand, Jeff.
Right, he might. He's thinking about it. It might
the very prestigious Pennington Academy,
right,
where you go to pen things.
Yeah. So, Davan, what do you think about this whole concept of building the ship to disprove, myth bust the Cardassians?
I like it a lot. It is a bit of a jarring follow-up to the Dias cast.
Yeah.
Because, everything kind of just went to hell, and now they're building a light ship and going on a little trip. But it doesn't bother me. I like the way DS9 does that. It kind of finds ways to, like they do that with the baseball episode later. They find a way to mix in a fun episode, even if it seems out of place.
People gotta have fun even in wartime.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But it is kind of, Cardassia did just attack the Dominion's homeworld, or at least the Obsidian Order did, more specifically, and that whole fleet got annihilated. How much time has gone by? At least enough time for him to grow a beard and go visit ruins on Bajor. So maybe a few weeks to a month, So maybe things have kind of quieted down, relatively speaking.
It's a great father-son story, I think.
I think it's the best one. I think this is maybe the best episode aside from The Visitor, with Jake and Ben. The father-son relationship. They had some good ones, and they had some ones that I was not as into, or maybe weren't as strong. But this one was a really good one. I think that the whole concept behind it is important.
Yeah, this is probably the best one with Cyril Lofton and Avery Brooks together. Yes, The Visitor to me is superior.
Yeah, and The Visitor is a great story, and it's a Jake Sisko story, but it's a Tony Todd episode because Cyril Lofton does not play Jake Sisko for the majority of that episode.
Yes, but this one's really great. And okay, so after we get the whole I'm going to build this ship moment, and we get the credits, we get, I think, one of the funnest moments.
Can I play it again? How many times will we get to play it?
Yeah, we'll play it. Yeah.
I wonder if a ship like that could really fly.
I don't know. That's why I'm going to build one.
That's why I'm going to build one.
Yeah.
And we discussed this a little bit on my podcast as well, because we were interested in the construction of the ship itself.
Yeah.
And how big the sails would have to be, and how light the material would have to be, and it was our conclusion that the ship's not quite big enough. But futuristic materials, though, if he's using ancient Bajoran materials, then I guess it's not futuristic materials. So again, maybe it's not quite big enough, that sail.
But it's alien material. We don't if Bajoran sails might be more suitable.
They may have elements we don't know about, the science.
Exactly, yeah.
There's unknowns to the science. But I think that it's just kind of incredible. But it's it's fantasy. It's all made up, but it's kind of like a cool way of tying it into this Bajoran history, talking about how this Bajoran culture is in many ways way more advanced than humans, but at the same time is less advanced at this point in history because of the occupation and other things in their history. And this idea, like when they eventually got to warp speed without a warp core, later on in this episode, I was like, this is like an incredibly imaginative thing, like this idea of tachyons and grabbing the solar sails. And Davan, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know if you are, but if you know anything more about the science, it sounds like you might. This is intriguing.
Well, tachyons are particles that move faster than light. So I guess what they're going with there is then they can be pushed faster than light.
If enough of them grab the sail, just like the wind grabs a sail, like the air part, in our atmosphere.
But it's a beautiful design. I love the design of that ship. It almost looked like some crazy fish.
Yeah, like a jellyfish or something. Yeah, but it doesn't explain, okay, I get how it moves in the ion storm or when the particles hit it, but how is it just moving away from the station? How is it with no...
Here's the other question is, how close is Bajor to Cardassia?
They don't really say. It's a few light years.
It's got to be close for this tin can cup of a ship that's made out of lumber. He had lumber, Jeff, shipped
but he
from
went,
Bajor.
He went warp 4 or 5 or something, didn't he?
Well, he doesn't know. I don't even understand. He didn't even
went
know.
warp 10.
He went to warp in a direction he didn't know. He didn't even have a deflector dish.
Well, they didn't turn into salamanders, so I don't think they went warp 10.
No.
Right.
No.
Okay. But I don't know how long it takes to get from Cardassia to Bajor. Probably a couple of days, though. No,
they didn't expect to go faster than light, and they expected it to take 5 days if it worked.
Right. And how many days is this episode? I don't really when they're on the.
I think it's about that, 4 days or so.
Chief told them it would take months, and it was impossible.
Yes. And Kira got very mad and said he's sounded like a Cardassian. And
yeah.
And then
he told Kira she was a Romulan.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Kira called him a Cardassian. So they had a great back and forth.
Yeah. It was very progressive of them.
Yeah, they really get that. I love they always argue with each other too. And it's great. It's usually about Cardassian stuff. If he ever falls not on the Bajoran side, it's like, what do you mean? And it's like, what do you mean that's crazy?
What do you mean? Yeah. What do you say?
He doesn't really like that. So
that doesn't fit into my Bajoran faith and prophecies and the whole thing. That's Kira's whole identity.
You're not making any sense.
Round the turbulent quick.
From Babel.
But this is where we kind of get introduced to the fact that Sisko is the builder captain. He's the engineer. He's the, he built the Defiant. He's building this ship. We don't see Picard building ships.
Well, this is the only time we see Sisko. Well, one of the only times, because you're right. We do get glimpses. They do reference it that he worked at Utopia Planitia. He was part of the design team. And it's not in this episode, but the episode where they go back to Earth in season 4. Is it Paradise Lost? I think. Yep. I think Admiral Layton there references that originally Sisko was an engineer. He wanted to be a chief engineer, and that was kind of his ambition. But then Layton brought him over into command, so we get to actually see Sisko using his skills here. And the whole time, Jane's like, "How could he do this? How could he just build a ship by himself in a bay?" Like I'm like, he's a Starfleet engineer. He can do anything. He can.
Right, and on purpose with the wrong tools. Like, you know, like with the Bajoran tools. Like he could, like, there's a whole quip in here. It's like, why don't you just use a laser cutter? He's like, no, I want a saw to cut the wood.
Yeah, I want to use a saw. He's taking his son into outer space, into the vacuum of space in this thing.
In something that's experimental, hypothetical. It's reckless in a lot of ways. It's a nice father-son episode, but what he's doing is putting his son's life in danger, and he kind of like bamboozles him into coming on this trip. And Jake agrees because he has to talk to him about this whole Pennington thing. But you know, that's kind of like it's the whole fun of this episode to me.
Even if you're gonna do like the experiment of it all, why not have a shuttle track them, like just in case, and have a transporter lock in case something happens, right? Or
just have the Defiant, like, you know, hovering around so it's within the sensors of the Defiant.
They got people to do that. Like this is like a scientific experiment, right? Like it's like a Mythbuster, like we've been referencing, right? Like could the ancient Bajorans get from Bajor to Cardassia in this solar sail ship? Find out.
Jamie and Adam are breaking it all down. You know, yeah.
What's the walrus thing?
I am the walrus. Okay. Okay, so then we get this moment here with Jadzia and Sisko. What do you guys make of that kind of interaction where they sit on the ship together?
About whether or not Jake, this is after he's asked Jake to come, and Jake's like, no, my girlfriend's coming into town. And we see these other hints that, Jake's hiding his pad. It doesn't say, it ought as well say go away. You know, you should like Bashir's to Dax did. Go away, Dad. I'm writing a story about my key. And
that would have been a fun like callback to that moment though if they'd done that twice.
Twice. Just different people or something similar. And you know, I as a father myself of a teenager now, I can definitely relate to what Ben is dealing with, you know, and I think Dax coming to talk to him about that and being someone who knows him from before, like when he got married and when Jake was born and has all that reference. I think that this was a good scene. I think that they both played it well. I thought Terry Farrell stronger than usual because a lot of times she phones it in these early seasons or she doesn't know quite how to play it.
Right.
She's finding her way in this one.
I think a lot of the actors are finding their ways with their characters in this episode. We've mentioned Bashir, we've mentioned, you know, Jake, Sisko. I think also Jadzia, you just mentioned. I think O'Brien gets to have the whole moment with Bashir, which we'll get to later, where he basically tells Bashir he doesn't hate him anymore, which is a nice way. Well, it's not so nice way.
I don't hate you anymore.
I hated you when we first met.
I remember.
No, I don't.
No, I don't. You know, he never says he likes.
And now I don't.
But
he also says you're either a love you or hate you. So he's kind of indirectly saying I love you.
Right. He does say that. Through his logic, I think Bashir got the message, even though he was hammered. But we will get to that. This ship.
That's a great scene too.
Yes. The design of the ship is really cool. Like they got like these cool old world maps and these gold like compasses and hammock time. Sisko says hammock time in this episode, which I
okay, but he said but the whole point of this was to do it authentic.
That's he didn't want to.
He didn't want to use a laser cutter, but he did put a gravity net in, Jeff. He references this in the Dax conversation.
Yes.
Weightlessness makes him queasy.
Right, because that's how the Bajorans traveled. Weightless.
Right, yeah. So like, and he's making Jake suck on the zero gravity rations, and he tells him he's gonna have to use the zero gravity toilet, even though there is gravity in his version of this ship. It's still a zero gravity. That part is the contradiction. Why is the toilet still built to exact standards if he's not going to be historically accurate completely?
I think Jake should have given him a hard time between the two things because he's cheating and at the same time trying not to cheat, which I think is kind of funny.
Because like this would have been cool to see them. Like I know they just didn't have the money. There was no way they could have done like a weightless version of this, but
no,
at this time and with the budget they had back then. But it would have been something if they could have done that version of this episode.
They just fly the set up. like 30,000 feet going to zero.
Well, they did a little bit of it. Remember what's her name from Elysium or whatever, who floated around her quarters.
Yes, they did do that. That's right.
Have to tie yourself into the hammock.
Yeah, you got to move around. Because when the ship accelerates, that's the other part I don't quite understand is why you wouldn't feel they must have an inertia dampener.
Oh, well, they had to have.
Or they would die when they accelerate.
Right.
I don't know how the sails don't rip off.
No, yeah, that too. There's a bunch of things that, really
Being hit by
poke holes.
tachyons and everything.
Well, they kind of do rip off, don't they? Well, sort of. He makes all these sailing references, and I don't fully understand those either. But yeah, he says, well, the what does he call them? The drifts or something? Yeah. Anyway, it was something else to see the ship in action and kind of work. They're doing the cranks and whatever, and they're doing all those things. I was like, yeah, maybe space travel can have a little bit more practicality. It doesn't have to be like this idea of a chemical rocket. I know that warp drive isn't that, but it kind of feels like it sometimes in TV because it just looks like an engine going and heating up and pushing you out. And this was a completely different approach.
Right. That's what a warp core seems to be, but that's not what a warp core is, right? That's not at all what it does.
What it does, it creates hot plasma, right? Yeah. That then is used to create a warp field. Right. And then
kind of the way they explain UFOs exist and stuff. It's the same kind of idea that they just appear and then
the warp field then stretches, it warps into this, and that allows you to go through space faster.
It's anti-gravity type idea. Okay, I have a question about the call from Dukat. Davan, is he calling Sisko because he's actually concerned about his well-being? Because what he's doing, like O'Brien said, is stupid and would probably not go well. Or is he calling to make sure that Cardassia's story about the Bajorans not being able to do this, is true, and he wants to preserve the history of Cardassia? What is your answer to that?
C, neither.
Why is he calling him?
Because at this point, Gul Dukat is already obsessed with Benjamin Sisko and what Benjamin Sisko thinks of him. And he's very interested in all the things Benjamin Sisko is doing. So it's just more of peeking over the fence to see what your neighbor that you
nosy neighbor
interesting is doing.
He's Wilson from Home Improvement.
Yeah, he's Wilson.
Well, he's like the guy who used to own your house, right? Because he used to be the commander of the station.
Yeah.
So he's also got that whole thing.
That can't let go.
Bajoran workers, your attention, please.
Then you move into the house and everyone in the neighborhood likes you better than him. And he's just, That's his goal, I think. I mean, sure, Cardassian Command probably maybe sent him a message or something. Who knows? But I don't see why they would really care. I mean, it's just a historical tidbit, really.
Does Sisko enjoy talking to Dukat? Does he enjoy the banter, or is it a waste of his time? He doesn't want anything to do with it.
Waste
of his time.
Yeah.
He just has to do it as a professional courtesy because the Cardassians and the Bajorans are so close. And
he's barking up the wrong tree there. Literally anybody but Sisko, Kira, or Odo, he might get a conversation out of, but
yeah. Okay. Dave, I'll agree on all points.
I agree that Sisko doesn't. I think he knows that at this point in the show that Dukat is sort of a person he doesn't particularly like, and I don't think he enjoys speaking to, but he considers him sort of an uneasy ally. And in the kind of the part of his mission is having a relationship with him at this point, because he's in a legitimate position of authority within his government. So it's more business than pleasure, right? I think.
Right. He's always got his back against the wall. He never wants to slip up. He's on his toes when he's talking to Dukat.
I like it changes throughout the show, but at this point, yeah, like they've had a few successes together. They've been on a few missions, and so it's not quite trust, but it's something. It's a developing relationship.
They have an interesting relationship that really changes in that episode where they crash land and Cisco breaks his arm and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fantastic episode that really shows off both the actors' abilities to like show you how two actors could do that. This episode does it as well. We have Sarah Clofton and Avery Brooks doing Jake and Cisco. I don't know if it's as strong because there's good scenes. I enjoy it, but I don't know if we needed like 5 or 6 scenes. I think we could have had a bit more of the station stuff. But I do enjoy it. I'm not saying I don't. It's not. It's they have a conversation about like the Pennington School. They have a conversation about him trying to set his dad up with Cassidy Yates, which we're not.
Can we talk about that? Can we talk? Okay, here's my question: is that Jake, and this is the beginning of this storyline where he'll push Cassidy Yates over and over to his dad. Yes. Now, I'm a fan of Cassidy Yates, and I think that the relationship was the best one. So, but it's always been a little bit weird to me that. But more importantly, here's my question: he goes, "Dad, she's a freighter captain." He goes, "Freighter captain? Woo! What the hell does that mean? Like what does that mean?"
I think it's supposed to mean like she's a tough woman. Like she commands people. She's a woman of authority. I think it's kind of like,
he's the commander of a space station. Deep space.
I know, and I think that's probably what intrigues him. It's a, okay, I could relate to that person in some way, right?
I don't get that impression
at all. About long distance relationships.
Yeah, maybe that's what he's referring to as well.
I think he's kind of saying the freighter captain might be a little bit shady.
Well, and that is what ends up happening. But she is shady.
Wow, that's a good callback, actually, considering that is what ends up happening. Because I agree, there was a bit of a shady thing there. Interesting callback.
I'll see you after you do your prison time. I'll be here for you on the other side. And he's like, do your time.
Yeah. Do your time, and I'll be waiting for you. I'm the one who
you betrayed your uniform.
She doesn't have a uniform.
No. Okay.
Well, let's go. Let's go maybe back to the Bashir storyline. Yeah. Right. Okay. So this whole idea that he threw his last test, he could have been first in his class, and the stakes of that, we're told, is that more preferential access to your assignments, because he talked about how he could have had any assignment he wanted.
Right.
That was set up right in the pilot, right from the beginning. But it turns out, that's kind of true. But actually, because he wanted Deep Space Nine, but she could have taken it if she wanted it, because she would have got preferential for him because of this test, which we isn't obvious through the game. So I guess it's like he's sort of having this midlife crisis, kind of maybe tied into that episode where he turned 30, the distant voices.
Right. And Garrick's was giving him a hard time about that. Yeah.
Yeah. What? Give him an easy time. He's turning 30.
Take it.
Easy. I guess like Bashir, he's like, I thought I'd be out there in the Lexington, maybe, finding these new discoveries and being like super famous. But that's, it's kind of been average. And I guess it's just, I find it relatable because it's kind of like when you're younger, you think you're going to set the world on fire. And then, it kind of averages out, or, there's a little bit more mundaneness to some aspects of life, even if you're a successful doctor on a space station.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Well, then Dax points out to him, it's like, well, did you want the Lexington? He's like, no.
No. And then she tells him it was a dud anyway.
Yeah.
Sometimes we found rocks with moss.
Yeah, I think
the moss was alive.
This is all about ego and what you know, with Bashir, it's like what he could have been, or it's the whole idea that maybe he shouldn't be where he is. Maybe he made that decision on purpose and it was a mistake. And I think that's what he's trying to figure out, you know.
Here's my other question. This whole thing where he tries to go up to say hello to her, he has to work up the courage for it, but then she walks right past him because he thinks it's some kind of deliberate snub, or she didn't see him. He gets drunk with O'Brien, which we do need to talk about that. But later on, she goes, I thought Julian Bashir was an Andorian.
Yeah, his buddy Eric.
Right. So it's almost like they never it's almost like they never met, never talked to each other.
They didn't.
But they were in the same class?
This is the woman who, she was the valedictorian of Starfleet Medical, and she doesn't know that Julian Bashir is not an Andorian name.
She doesn't know who she beat. Like, she doesn't know like who came second. I guess you just looked.
No, because his speech was before, and she was backstage, and she was nervous. What? But then she says later that she read his paper.
Yes,
like his very advanced paper on the T cells on Bajor. Again, doesn't know he's a human being and not a member of her own species, mind you. Not an Andorian. Who are blue and have antenna.
Yeah, and how many are named Julian? I mean,
none.
How is this woman the valedictorian?
I would venture to say none.
You know,
she's good at medicine.
Good at medicine, yes. You know, good at.
So she's either completely gaslighting him and she's completely bullshitting this whole thing that she does remember him or whatever, and this is a cover up, or you know, and she never wanted. She was like everyone. She's a love him or hate him. She's definitely on the hate him, and she was like, I managed to get through almost all of medical school without talking to him. You know.
Yeah, maybe she says that to everybody from her graduating class. Oh, I thought you were Andorian.
I thought you were Andorian.
Just to be like, kind of be aloof and be like,
she could
busy
be like
being valedictorian.
Maybe kind of like it feels like she's above everybody, a little snobbish. I could see that.
She seemed like a nice lady, though. Actually,
she did. But you know, when you're in school and when you're younger, you know, sometimes you're a little bit more competitive, and maybe that's how they both were. They were, you know, anytime you go to school, like a big class, there's, you know, usually like one or two people who are like the top people, and you know who they are usually in the school. At the time, like once you graduate, you're like, oh, that's the smartest person, and they went all the way.
But Jeff, let's go back, right? Like in between there, when they go to have the drinking song, and I
Jerusalem.
You know, I pulled it. Just the end part of it.
In England's green and pleasant land.
That was really beautiful, Chief.
Yeah. This is the beginning of them actually showing the audience that these guys are friends. I think they went on some wacky adventures together and they bonded, but they weren't friends. I don't think.
This is the most, like, we saw that they had the dartboards and they've had a few things, but them getting drunk, I think, is like, you know, and this wasn't a Synthale kind of night.
No, this isn't a Synthale kind of night.
To me, I wonder, do these guys go get hammered together like all the time? And sometimes they're like, you know what, we should get the Synthale out. We're better than this. And
I think we should switch to Synthale.
You know,
he's like, no.
If the Irishman is the one saying we should cut back, I mean, you know, there's something wrong.
This is O'Brien. He loves, like, whatever. Is it whiskey or scotch that they're pounding back here? I can't tell.
But they might be Irish whiskey. I don't know.
This was brilliant, putting these two characters together. I don't even know if we'll ever get it. I thought about this too. I was like, when will we ever get an Irishman and a British or Englishman, like as these characters put into the same cast? You know, in the same.
I guess you could do it with like a couple of Americans if they're both from like a certain part of America. And
yeah, but usually the cast is a little bit more diverse. But this was actually like these two. Not, but it works.
But not a surprise, though. I mean, Star Trek often casts theater actors, and a lot of them are British, you know, and that's kind of.
And they're still diverse because, like, Bashir is like, you know, well, at least Alexander Siddig's half Sudanese, but, you know, like they're.
Yeah, he's royalty.
Royalty, yes. But he's also got this whole. He's very English too. So
Yes.
Yeah, Malcolm McDowell's his uncle.
yeah, man. Time is the fire in which we burn.
Yeah.
What's his name in that movie again? Something with an S.
Soren.
Soren. That's it.
I must go back and stop Soren.
Soren, the Nexus. Hello, Papa. Lovely doll, Papa.
We get a lot of the next.
Picard and Janeway have the strangest fantasies. Like, Cisco's a weird dude, but
Isn't it funny though? They've that in Generations. It's called the Nexus, the line thing, right?
The ribbon.
That alters reality. Where have we heard that before with Nexus? It's in Marvel. Like they use the Nexus, Nexus events in Loki, and we have the WandaVision Nexus commercial, and she's in Nexus.
I think they stole it from Star Trek.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I'm just saying.
Don't worry, Star Trek's stolen plenty of things from other things. So borrowed it, taken inspiration from, if you will. Yeah, but I love the scene. I love Jeff. I love O'Brien giving him shit. He's just like, it's maybe she's in love with you.
It's the only explanation.
Yeah, he's so great in it, and it's like, and Bashir, plays it great where he's just like sad, and he's like, we should go sing it for them all, and all that, and he's like, I don't know,
we should go to Quarks and sing that song for all of them. He says, "This is one of my favorite scenes all ever." We don't have Keiko.
Miles.
She's not there.
I love Keiko.
But the show decided we cannot have Keiko and Bashir. Bashir cannot be getting drunk with Molly sitting there playing with her blocks. We can have both. Is basically what the show said, which I understand. I mean, the O'Brien doing this with Molly and Keiko, making some scrambled eggs right over there would be a little weird.
Yeah, whose quarters are they at there anyway?
I think they're at O'Brien's.
I think these are O'Brien's quarters. Yeah, he's got the bigger quarters.
Yeah,
he's a chief.
Yeah,
and a family man.
And we've established
a union man.
Yes. And we've established that Bashir, nobody really likes Bashir, so they probably gave him the smallest of the bridge crew, quarters, I would imagine.
Chief, I thought you were going to fix the replicators.
Yeah. I thought he was going to fix them too. Okay. What else to talk about here? I mean, with Cisco and Jake, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like in this episode, I mean, it's basically they're flying. Other than the conversations they had about the Pennington School, which I do think is, I think Dave's right what he said earlier about the conversation that they have, about like Cisco talking about how he beamed in every night to have dinner in New Orleans from San Francisco. I think it's a great story for him to tell Jake in that moment, and like it feels real, so there's a lot of great writing in this episode. It is a little slow, but it's worth it.
Yeah, like I thought that the whole thing with like him giving the backstory, I always thought about that. I was like, well, what would it be like if you lived on Earth and you went to Starfleet Academy? He's like, yeah, I could beam home to my living room every night if I wanted to. And we know how far apart San Francisco and New Orleans are. But I think that also, like, they ran into this on Next Gen with the Wesley Crusher character. It's like when people reach 18 years old or around that age, they tend to, a lot of them would go off to some kind of school. So that doesn't really bode as well for them staying sort of on this stationary show, or, like it could or couldn't, you can build it in, or you can build it like Jake's not in every episode. So you could send him off to school and he could pop in as many times as he does and say not say he lives on the station. It wouldn't matter. We wouldn't notice.
Right. And it comes, like he could have popped in and been part of the Dominion War all the same. It really wouldn't have mattered. But I do think they wanted to use Jake as like an emotional crutch for Cisco in certain moments, like when he gets left on the station and the Dominion's there and Cisco's like, we can't go back for one man, even if he is my son, like, all those kind of things. So I do think they wanted him as a plot device more than anything.
Well, and also it's interesting to see how different the two characters are. Like, I think watching and watching how Jake and Ben are two very different people. And they definitely have a love and a respect for each other, but they think very differently and they want different things.
They don't seem to have a lot in common either, as far as Jake's a writer. He's more involved with stories and storytelling. And Cisco is more about trying to find out who he is and his meaning, his story. His story's happening right. His life is a story, and he doesn't.
Yes.
He needs to figure it out. He needs to know, why am I the emissary? What is the wormhole? They didn't even like he says the Dukat in this episode. You guys thought this was a fairy tale, and then all of a sudden we found the Celestial Temple. So
Jake's like a people person. He grew up on Deep Space Nine, pretty much. So he's like a dom jot hustler, and
yes, he could have been, he could be like the host for Quark's bar. No problem. He's such a good a good man of the people in a lot of ways. Whereas Ben is a little bit more focused on certain things. He's kind of like a Joe Rogan, where he's he puts his mind into something and he just goes full tilt.
What do we see here? Ben Sisko, he likes to build things with his hands. He likes to go more rugged. He likes to go on camping trips, and he likes to cook food, and
grow his own peppers,
and things like that.
He wants to go to Beijing.
You know how hard it is to grow tomatoes?
It's not.
He puts tarragon in stuffing.
Yes, I do.
Though you did put too much tarragon in the stuffing.
Well,
yeah,
that's a mistake.
And he likes to play baseball. He's a man's man. He
likes baseball. He has hobbies and skills that I don't think they really show. Janeway, what is Janeway into? Compared to how much we
cucumber sandwiches.
She loves coffee.
Weird holodeck novels where she plays the nanny to really mean and annoying children.
Yeah, rich children too.
Yeah.
And she
I'll be your governess, Virginia.
Well, she likes creativity. She's a bit of a scientist and an artist, hanging out with Da Vinci and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a Renaissance woman.
Woman. Okay, that's a good way to put it. But it's not entirely her fault, her character's fault, because she's stranded. But you think in this episode they're stranded and they talk a lot about a lot of different things, because they have the time.
Well, what did you think when how he reacted to Jake's story, where he was like, "It's good, shows a lot of promise, shows promise."
Yeah,
but I hope you haven't actually done these things. We don't get the full details of the story, but it's something about a Maquis rebellion or something.
That's a good scene though. Jake's just I can't talk about it.
Can't talk about it. And then it's good. It's a good moment. He's like,
glaring at him I had enough of these Maquis traders. Everyone, my best friend's a Maquis trader.
Hudson, your godfather. I don't know.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if he's his godfather, but there's a good chance he was.
Don't you set me up with a Maquis trader either.
Yeah.
He's like, I totally will. Okay. So then we get the drunken fest, and it's great.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered that. So I think maybe we just skip to the end where they get to they don't know where they are. They go to warp and the whole thing. We kind of talked about it already, but this when I saw them actually going that fast the first time and again, and even though they're off track and they don't know where they are and their comm unit's not working, I thought there's the scene here where the three Cardassian ships show up and there's they play the ominous music for a second, or what do they want? And then
they're here to destroy the evidence.
They're here we'll never admit that ancient Bajorans came here in a solar ship. And the whole scene here where Dukat's like, congratulations, it just coincides with the wreckage we just found just this minute. Isn't that? He's like, what a coincidence.
Right.
So the Cardassians clearly knew all along. Their pride wouldn't allow them to admit it until Cisco proved it. Right?
Fireworks are nice.
Fireworks.
Yeah, and it's a good moment because it's like the Cardassians acknowledging the Bajorans and Cisco did it, and it's like Kind of
It was like the
wonky-
nicest moment, like one of the nicest moments, like in Deep Space Nine, I think, because it was like a cell. It's right up there with when they got when Jake went and
Yeah,
got
it
Ben
goes
the
up there
baseball
for a minute.
card.
Yeah, it's yeah. Those two things are very sentimental.
Oh,
Oh.
I think he's just refreshing.
Yeah, no, they're very sentimental both moments, and I think this one's surpasses it because like he's like you did the ancient Bajorans well, and it's tying the history and the current state of the conflict between the Cardassians and Bajorans, and kind of putting a nice moment to kind of like let's go forward, like but looking back at the same time, and I think that's really nice. I think it's a great moment. And Ducat's really proud, and Ben and Jake are really proud, and they both. There's no animosity. There's no.
I was crying,
nefarious-
Jeff.
Yeah,
I
there's no
cried
nefarious-
for this part.
The
The
Cardassians
fireworks?
don't care at all.
Just the
They're-
fireworks and just like the hug, the
Yeah,
hug
it's
between.
beautiful.
It reminds me.
Beautiful.
It reminds me of a lot at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 when they do the same, very similar when Yondu dies, where they do the whole fireworks thing. So maybe they should have done a little father-son moment song over that because I think it's very similar. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the episode.
Yeah, so we'll get into our trivia now.
Ooh, trivia.
Fun facts, or as we call it, Double F with Jeff.
Double F with Jeff.
We call it double F. Okay. Ooh, we got this is okay. There's way too many. Okay, wait. No, wait.
What?
Okay, sorry. One sec. I went to the wrong thing.
Well,
Yeah, fill the
I'll
time, Dave. Fill the time.
I'll with the details discovered by Dave, Cassidy Yates is mentioned for the first time, although she does not appear until Family Business. We did mention that. And then we mentioned this is also the first time we had the goatee on Ben Sisko, as played by Avery Brooks.
Right.
Dave,
Dave, did you know that this episode was originally called the Butterfly episode?
because of the ship. The ship looks like a butterfly.
Yeah, I guess. I think it looks like a jellyfish, but I guess it's a bit of or a bug with like
A moth.
yeah, it's kind of a
I was
moth.
thinking more like a lionfish.
Lionfish, yeah.
Well, it's kind of it's a whole bunch of different things.
Speaking of the ship, John Knoll at Industrial Light and Magic created the light ship as a CGI model. He later used the model for a Coram lawn ship in Deep Space Nine Ascension.
Ascension.
No, it's called. It says Ascension. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right. Actually, maybe they spelled it wrong. The awkward moment between O'Brien and Bashir marks the beginning of a running joke about the chief's love for his best friend. A later example is Hippocratic Oath, in which he finds himself agreeing completely with Bashir's analysis of a fight he had with Keiko, and stops short of saying he wishes Keiko was a man, much to the Doctor's amusement. Another situation comes up in Extreme Measures, where O'Brien refuses to admit that he likes Bashir more than Keiko.
I hated you when we first met.
I remember.
I remember. I love the way he says that. He's like, it's been 3 years of you guys just dunking on me. I've had enough. Okay. No explanation is ever provided as to how a Bajoran light ship managed to penetrate Bajor's atmosphere without burning up, nor how such a light ship was propelled high enough to make it through the atmosphere. It can therefore be inferred that either ancient Bajorans built their light ship outside of Bajor's atmosphere, or the light ships were housed within some sort of rocket capable of atmospheric penetration. In either case, their early technology must have been far superior to that any other major power in the Alpha Quadrant during that period.
Well, that thing. So, like, I wish we. Sometimes I think it was kind of a miss that they moved the station so far away from Bajor and the planet, because there's more like to the Bajorans we could have maybe got, but because Bajor is a planet with something like 9 moons, like that are habitable and have atmospheres, and so like. In terms of what they could have done, where and how they built this, I think there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah. The light ship and the basic plot of this episode was inspired by the voyage of the Kon-Tiki, a deliberately primitive sailing craft that Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl used to sail from Peru to Tahiti in 1947. Substantially substantiating his belief, later disproved that it was possible that a pre-Columbian South American civilization could have settled Polynesia by making a transoceanic voyage, which is very similar actually to what is happening in this episode.
I have an outrage.
I never made that connection before. That's interesting.
I have an outrage detail, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead.
David Livingston, who is the not the director of this episode,
Triple D,
but he said it was a bottle show, but an interesting bottle show with a father and son relationship and some interesting computer graphics of a sailing ship. We were reluctant to do computer graphics, but Peter Lorison finally came around. He recognized how valuable it is. You can do more stuff with the ship, but you have to do it right. Not to pick on other shows, but Babylon 5 looks like computer-generated imagery. On Voyager, Deep Space Nine, you may not know some of these shots are motion-controlled shots. They're really, really good if done properly. You have to spend a couple extra bucks and get really good artists. But CGI just allows you to do more, and you can build more elements in the shots. Does he have to trash and slag on Babylon 5, Jeff?
Yes.
Low-hanging fruit.
Thank you.
Babylon 5 only had a third of the budget of Deep Space Nine.
Right. And they used real models or computers?
Computer generated. It was all computer generated.
So I guess that was cheaper back then than to do real models.
Well, like at the quality level they were doing it at, yes, because it didn't look. It looked like it was computer generated. It didn't fully look like real practical stuff. Like, but it was good enough. Like you could suspend disbelief as far as I was.
Those models were huge, so they're probably expensive.
Oh, it's hugely expensive to do the practical models and shoot them and everything else. But Star Trek had that kind of budget.
Right.
Babylon 5 did not. And shows like Battlestar. I don't know how Battlestar like in the 80s would have done it, if they would have done practical or not. I guess they would have had to.
Okay. In what might have been a nod from the 24th century to the 20th century, in particular rapper MC Hammer, Sisko tells Jake that they need to put up the hammocks on the ship, and as he unrolls the hammock, Sisko says, "Hammock time," and both he and Jake then say, "Yo."
Do they?
Yeah.
Did they?
They go, "Yo."
I didn't.
Wow.
They said "yo" to hammock time.
They did.
They do. It says "yo." Hop in. Phew. Oh man. Nice.
Okay, so that's great. This episode contains the second hint of Jake's literary talents. It was revealed in The Abandoned that he wrote romantic love poetry. Here, he is revealed to have composed a short story about the Maquis.
Yeah. So like I never read anything Jake wrote, so I can't say.
This one's interesting. The concept of a solar sail was first proposed on Earth by Russian scientist Konstantin I'm just going to say Tsiolkovsky in 1921. That's a tough name. So the Bajorans were apparently using solar sails about 400 years before anyone on Earth thought of the concept. But so far, solar sails have still not actually been used by anyone from Earth. But they thought about it in 1921. So this is how.
So it's okay. So Davin, you seem to know more about this. This is theoretically possible, though. You're saying that the stress could break off the sails, at least in this design. But do we not have the material? Can we do this? What, like he's saying, it's theoretically possible.
Just think of how thin and light a material would have to be pushed by light, for one thing.
Yeah.
So,
right.
like the micrometer's thin, right? So
Bajoran lumber, was that what would do it?
I mean, you almost have to weave it out of some sort of like super strong, like even silk would seem to be too thick. Like it would have to be very, very thin and very, very large, especially if you want to go with these speeds.
But even in
especially as you get further and
space
further
where
from the sun.
there's no resistance, or there's gravity. Like that's the resistance in space, right? So,
well, yeah. Well, I mean, and they do that's in like a empty vacuum, but they're going through the Denorius belt as well, so they're hitting like turbulence and resistance from solar winds, and so
yeah. Could they have done more with this, Jeff? Like, could they have?
I love the concept though, and I do love the concept of solar ships.
Like, what do you mean? Like if further episodes, like
more with the
idea?
journey, make the journey with Sisko and Jake more intense, maybe a little bit ride the rapids a little bit more, maybe on this, and have less of the Bashir storyline.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what they should have done, but for the most part, it's a pretty smooth trip for them. Like they never seem to be in danger, really. I mean, they do have the sail rip off at one point.
Maybe because they know we would criticize Cisco, even though we already did, for taking his son on this kind of dangerous mission.
I think they were conscious about that.
So that's going to downplay it a bit. Yeah.
Did they not have a long range communicator though? Like,
that's well, they did. They had that little thing. He's like, it's not working. He's like, what do you mean it's not working? Are we going to run out of air?
Yeah.
No.
He's like, well, eventually. But
I just love that too. He's just like, they're going to find us, right? Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's like,
yeah.
Season 3, they're not going to kill both of us.
Yeah.
During the conversation between Julian Bashir and Elizabeth Lentz, the writers may have been commenting on the comparison between DS9 and other Trek series. Bashir believes Lentz, quote, must have had quite an adventure out there, exploring uncharted space, meeting fascinating new races with fascinating new diseases aboard the USS Lexington. But she instead describes how bored she got between discoveries. The message especially comes through when Lentz claims, quote, I really envy the opportunity you have to work on this kind of long-term project. On the Lexington, it was to collect your samples and then go onto the next system. This seems to recall some of the producers' comments about how DS9 was different from TOS and TNG, and how in those two shows, issues raised each week could be simply forgotten about the following week as the ship moved on to another planet. Yeah, that's actually a great, and she's wearing the TNG uniform, which I don't think is a mistake. I think it's on purpose.
Yeah, I'm convinced.
Yeah. All right.
So what are they trying to say? Like, it's not all cracked up on that starship?
They're trying to say, I think, like, if you want,
that's got Ira Bear written all over it.
I think it's the writers trying to tell other Star Trek shows, if you want to do a show about Star Trek, it's probably better to set them in one place rather than have them gallivanting all over the place. Even though it's called Star Trek, it probably makes more sense to have a central location where everyone's coming to you, and then you can go out and trek or whatever. But it makes more sense to keep characters in the same spot all the time and have them interact and really make the place their home. Whereas the Enterprise, like, they could kill a character and then replace them. They do it. They do it with Tal Shiar. Not Tal Shiar. What's her name?
Tashiar.
Tal Shiar. It's actually,
although her Sela, her daughter, not a member of the Tal Shiar, but yes,
Tashiar, member of the Tal Shiar. That's actually pretty great.
Too bad it didn't happen.
Okay, I think that's it for Double F.
Well, I think just on that point, Jeff, like just on a point of discussion, like what Deep Space Nine is the only one of these shows, only one of these Star Trek family of shows to be set in one place. Yes. The rest of them are ships of some form,
which is
right?
A place, I guess you could say.
It's a place. It's more like a vehicle. It moves around,
right? And it changes, more often. Because they blow the ship up and they get a new one.
Because in Deep Space Nine they have the Defiant, but they even blow it up in Season 7 and they get a new one, and they blow those runabouts up so many times they don't matter.
And it allows Deep Space Nine to not have to waste so much time on setup. Like the first 10 minutes of every TNG episode and Voyager episode is just setting the new setting where they're at. So Deep Space Nine generally skips over all that, and you just jump right into like a funny scene, and then you're into the story, and then away you go.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't have to build as many sets either on Deep Space Nine. Because they don't have to do all that setup. They don't have to be like, "Hey, we're at this planet." They don't have to do the amount of makeup. The amount of makeup they had to do for Voyager and TNG when they go to like a Kazon planet or something like that.
A lot of purple cave planets.
A lot of purple cave planets. A lot of funky noses. A nose with like some reason nostrils coming out here or maybe up here. Like anyway, let's get
nose.
Let's rate this episode. And if any of our panelists who are out for various reasons, Ashley, Kevin, Jaemeel, if any of you are out there in the comments, feel free to chime in. But Jeff, why don't you start us off with a rating tonight?
I'm like a 9.2.
Wow.
It's a good episode. I think it's a very transformative episode for the series.
Yeah, like I really like the Cisco storyline. I think the Bashir storyline is funny in parts, and I think that O'Brien but it's not like not my favorite moment either. So I feel like I can only go as high as like maybe an 8.5. Okay, I'm not sure about Ashley, Kevin, Jaemeel, but Davan, what do you think?
So am I rating this as compared to like the other episodes, or just in its
out of 10? What do you think it deserves?
Accomplished trying to do what that episode was trying to do.
You have your history there of giving. You gave a 9.5 and 9 to those 2 episodes that came before it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Ooh, jeez. Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to go 9.6.
Wow.
Because in a way, I think this is a perfect episode. Everything about it I find enjoyable, like the ending, the funny story with O'Brien and Bashir and Dr. Lenz and the father-son thing. It's kind of perfect. Every scene is enjoyable.
Yeah,
there were no bad scenes.
No.
There's just
everything serviced one of the stories. Just good.
I'm getting 0.2 more for me for that. Yeah, that's true.
I think it's just like, do you want more of the Cisco Jake stuff? Do you want more Bashir stuff? That's really
like
it.
A lot of the times I could take the Jake and Ben stuff, like take it or leave it sort of thing, like because it's sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, especially some of that early Jake stuff I think is weak. Because they're trying to find their way, but
he's a kid at the beginning.
He's a kid in the beginning, and it's not as it takes he's wearing those weird onesies with the weird patterns and different things.
Yeah, he's getting thrown up on. There's lots of weird stuff going on with Jake as a kid, but yeah, once he becomes a writer, and this is really the first episode where it's like he wrote a story, and I think this is where they're taking the character. There was no direction for Jake before. It was like he's hanging out with Nog and he's hooking up with girls that are older than him. That's it, And he has something to do. He has a purpose.
Yes, and do you know what that is? Chicken paprikash. Next week we'll be having Ben Cisco making chicken paprikash because he only cooks Hungarian food when he's in a good mood. Jeff.
That's right. Talking about the paprika.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all about the paprika. That's right. Anyway, so we're going to be also going to Ferenginar next week because I believe we're going to get a little bit of who. Where is it? I don't know.
Boogie. Yes, Moogie will be making her reappearance here on D6 at 9ish. So catch that next week. Dave, what do we have coming up on our hosts of shows that we have?
This is
networks
on our family of podcasts. Well, this is a bit of a quieter week than most, but on Sunday we just had our last installment of Trivial Debates, which is our monthly show where we argue about movies, TV, sports, and more. That was hosted by Adam Woodward. We had Jody Simpson. We had newcomer Mike O'Connor, and also Chris Seymour competing. That was a Canada Day themed episode. A lot of Canada questions. We do that on the last Sunday of every month, and Mike O'Connor, who is the new guy this time, he'll be hosting the next one for July. So check those out. Also, here on Live Long In podcast, well, we've done many things. We've covered many different shows. If there's a Star Trek episode out there, we probably covered it. Last year, we covered things like Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, Star Trek Lower Decks. And we're going to be doing that again very soon. Jeff, Lower Decks will be coming back in August, and we're going to be covering that. Yeah, we're going to be covering Discovery. We got different panelists in the Live Long In podcast world to cover those things. Plus, on it used to, as of until this last week, it was on Wednesdays. We talked about Star Trek, the original series, but join the change-ins as we move to Mondays as we're going to be covering Big Brother.
I love the graphic. I mean, can't beat that.
Yeah, so change-ins as our TED Trek podcast we're going to be doing, as we only have about 16 episodes left of the original series to rewatch and cover with our dad Ted. We're coming down to the end here, but our next one is The Enemy Within, which is the one where Kirk gets split into like a good version, a bad version by the transporter incident. Shatner's maybe his biggest example of overacting. And we're going to be talking about that.
I want to live. Is that one?
Yeah, he's like, I'm scratching, and all these things. So it's quite something. I can't. So Monday, check that out. July 5th, we'll be back. We'll be off tomorrow. Not his dad has some kind of conflict, and we'll be continuing those TED Treks and our Star Trek Radio Theater podcasts, which we'll have one soon. We're probably gonna do one later in July here. Looking ahead as we do our script reads and Super Mater Brothers podcasting, which is our third channel Jeff and I started, which we talk about shows that are not Star Trek, including Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. We're going to be doing, covering, actually, Jaemeel Robinson and I are going to be covering Black Widow coming up on July 10th. We're going to be doing a Loki first season recap coming up on, I think that's going to be around July 17th. Plus, we're next week, July 7th, Jeff, we start Big Brother USA season 23 as the premiere of that will come on for a 90-minute episode. And then we'll kick into a Sunday, Wednesday, Thursday schedule the week of July 11th. So
expect the unexpected.
Expect the unexpected, as they say.
Yep. Is that it?
Did I forget anything?
No, that's a lot.
That's a lot of things.
A lot of things, but okay, so I think we're good. Join us next week where we get into family business with Cork and Moogie. This has been Tuesdays Night at 9ish, and for all of us here, I Live Long in Podcast. Remember, it's hammock